independent of the next. So if you enjoyed tonight's reflection, ask a friend to join us next week, in 2 weeks, so December the 5th, the 12th, and the 19th. At the beginning of each of our 4 reflection presentations, I will introduce a relevant general topic of artistic or art historic interest. We will then explore 3 pieces of art in greater detail, from a wide range of artistic time periods and styles, from the 15th until the 21st century. First, for each piece, I will provide a brief summary about the life of the artist. Then, as you contemplate the piece of work on the screen or on your handout, I will read a passage from a relevant scripture to help us explore the artwork. And thirdly, together we will explore the significance of the work for this Advent season. As we explore each piece, please share your impressions, thoughts, reflections, and questions with us. And tonight, Amelia will help us with the microphone. So please pause to use the microphone for your comments, and so to allow everyone in the chapel and also whoever's joining us online to hear your comments and reflections. A handout is available for everyone here in the chapel, containing the images and a brief synopsis of the artists and the context of the works. The same document is available as a PDF for everyone who follows us online. With this background, let us begin with a brief introduction. Advent marks the beginning of the new liturgical year. The first day of Advent this year happens to fall on December the 1st. And Advent comes from the Latin word of adventus, meaning coming or arrival. During the 4 weeks of Advent, we wait with great anticipation of the coming of Jesus Christ, his arrival on Christmas Day. Furthermore, we begin to prepare our hearts and minds for the second coming of Christ, either at the time of our death or when he redeems the whole world. Throughout our past reflections, we have met a number of persons who had been predestined by God to play a profound role in the history of the world. In our Advent series in 2022, we reflected on the life and work of St. John. During last year's Advent reflection, we explored the important role of St. John the Baptist. The most prominent person in Jesus' salvation mystery is, of course, the Virgin Mary. And she will be central to many of the works of art we will see in our reflection series this year. But we will also meet Saint Eve, the mother of mankind, Saint Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary, as well as Saint Elizabeth, Mary's cousin and the mother of Saint John the Baptist. Clearly, many others, and not to forget, every one of us has been predestined by God's own glory, so that his saving purpose will work through all of us. Following this brief introduction, I will now turn our attention towards our 3 works of art of this evening. On this slide, you can see the timeline of the different artistic periods in European art, ranging from the 15th century, so beginning with the Renaissance, to contemporary art in the 21st century. This timeline helps us to appreciate the historical separation in concomitant cultural differences that influence the major artistic styles. This timeline will also help us to visualize the 500 years of art history over which this evening's 3 works of art were created. Slide. Our first work of art of this evening was created rather recently, in 2005 by Sister Grace Remington. She's of the Cistercian Sister of the Mississippi Abbey in Iowa. The title of the painting, Virgin Mary and Eve. Sometimes it's also referred to the Virgin Mary consoling Eve. The painting beautifully alludes to the truth that God restarted creation once again after the fall through the Virgin Mary. And in Scripture, the Virgin Mary and Eve, the mother of mankind, are intimately connected in God's unified story, stretching from Genesis to Revelation. Slide. Our second painting, the Presentation of the Virgin at the Temple, was created in between 1534 and 1538 by Titian. The work commemorates the presentation of Mary in the temple in Jerusalem as a child by her parents Joachim and Anne. And we celebrate this feast today on November the 21st. The feast actually dates back into the 6th century. And then it was also celebrated in Italy around the 9th century. However, it was not until the 15th century that it was included in the Roman Missal. The feast was briefly removed from the Roman Church calendar by Pope Pius V in 1568 until Pope Sixtus V re-established it for good in 1585. Slide. The third and final work of this evening is the Virgin and Child with St. Anne and St. John the Baptist. It is also known as the Burlington House cartoon. It's not quite sure when it was created. There's conflicting evidence. It's either was created between 1499 and 1500 or 1506 and 1508 by the Italian Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci. Slide. So let's turn to our first work of art. As I said, this was created in 2005 by Sister Grace Remington. It is a contemporary drawing. It was drawn with crayon and pencil. And as I introduce the artist, if it's helpful, you can follow along on the handout. Sister Grace Remington was born in 1971 in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Both her parents taught in the English department at the University of Iowa. Sister Grace was baptized Catholic like her father, but most of her childhood Christian formation took place in her grandmother's Reformed Church of America and her mother's Presbyterian Church. Sister Grace studied Latin at Grinnell College, where she graduated with a degree in biology. Since 1997, Sister Grace has been a nun of Our Lady of the Mississippi Abbey in Dubuque, Iowa. Our Lady of the Mississippi Abbey belongs to the Order of Cistercians of the Strict Observance. It is also known as Trappist. It is a cloistered Roman Catholic contemplative religious order founded in 1664, consisting of separate monasteries of monks and nuns. Cistercians follow the rule of St. Benedict. They do not teach or work in parishes. However, they pray together 7 times a day, starting at 4 a.m. Each service centers on the chanting of the Psalms, the reading of scriptures, and the singing of hymns. The monasteries support themselves through the production of produce, such as cheese, bread, beer, and in the case of the convent of Our Lady of the Mississippi Abbey, by making Christmas candy, which I can highly recommend. They're very good. And which is interesting, Sister Grace is not a trained artist. And to my knowledge, she has not produced any other works of art. So this was her moment. And according to her own words, while she was drawing, she actually called it doodling, she was pondering the question of why Eve said no to God, and while Mary said yes, and how Eve had no idea what it would mean to live in a fallen world, separated from God. And so now, as you consider our first work of art of this evening, I will quote from St. Irenaeus from his book Against Heresies. Since St. Irenaeus, one of the early church fathers, was Bishop of Lyon in France in the 1st century. And I quote, "Eve, by disobeying, became the cause of death for herself and the whole human race. So Mary was obedient and became the cause of salvation for herself and the whole human race. Just as the human race was subject to death by a virgin, it was freed by a virgin." End of quote. And so we can kind of look at this also with the idea of Eve becomes the mother of all living. Mary, which kind of often is also named the new Eve, becomes the mother of all who live in Christ. And now comes my favorite part, and I hope also your favorite part. And I open this painting or this work of art up to everyone in the room. And there, Michael is straight on it.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I love the imagery of Eve being hobbled by the snake. You know, she's tripping, you know, it's got her tripped up. And Mary is crushing the head of the snake. She's destroying what was Eve's downfall.
Yes.
It's perfect. It's a great imagery. I like it. Is there some symbolic meaning of pears in classical art or something? Because we usually say it's the apple, which was the fruit of the tree of wisdom or whatever.
Right.
But there's no reason it should be an apple. But.
Right. So I think that's very, very interesting. And just keep in mind she wasn't a professional artist. And looking at the leaves, does that remind you maybe of another plant? I know everyone thinks the fruit comes across as pear, but it's supposed to be referring to a different fruit. Figs. Okay. Yeah. So the leaves I think are very good. The fruits, yeah, it's more a pear. But if you think the figs are very important symbols for fertility and prosperity, because there's so many seeds in it. And I think even the figs play a role in other religions. I think in Buddhism, the fig has a very high importance. Yes.
I'm just touched by the expression on both women's faces, with Eve just looking so downtrodden and sad, and then Mary with kind of almost a little smile there, kind of it's going to be okay, and the reassurance that both and with her hand on her stomach too,
yes.
With a kind of a 60-ish look to Eve. I know that's hair, but.
Yes, I love that. Exactly. I think that's where I think the title comes from as well, consoling. Mary is very generous to her, very tender. As you say, she even has a little smile. And I think she is thinking, hey, it's going to be all right. Because you're clutching to the fruit of the downfall, but I'm carrying the fruit of the salvation. And so this intimacy between the two, I think, is very beautiful, yes.
I just want to comment on putting these two women together. That just strikes me as kind of a wow. How did she think of that? Because I've never thought of them as being in a relationship with each other, mm-hmm. or seen them pictured together, or it's kind of wakes me up. I think it's really exciting that she thought to do this.
Yeah. And maybe we can go to another, if you go, actually, one more time. One more time. There you go. Yes, and I think that's the play on Eve and the new Eve. So that Mary really has that title, it's sometimes used, and the connection in Genesis 3, I'm not great, this 3:15, is where it also speaks about the new Eve that will come to then crush the sin, as Michael referred, the serpent is being crushed underneath her foot. And we will see that next week when we have an image about the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary. Many times the serpent is included in those paintings where Mary will crush the serpent. And yeah, I think it's beautiful. So one thing that I've learned, because I said Saint Eve, and when Chris read it, he always reads whatever I prepare for these evenings, he's like, I don't think she's a saint. But I know it's quite interesting. She is, Amelia, or you were thinking the same? No, since very early in the church, Adam and Eve have been acknowledged as saints because they are the parents of all mankind. And after they have left paradise, they did live in penance. And they were the first to enter heaven. So yeah, it is interesting. And I think what I was reading up is that in the past, they were much more venerated, and they had kind of fallen out of favor, particularly with the Reformation. Yeah, they have a particular, and their feast day is actually on December the 24th. So right at that interplay of the birth of Christ. So I thought is that all correct? So, and then maybe if we go to actually look at, if you go one, oh yeah, so yeah, this is, I love this. I think this is very interesting. Yeah, so the serpent is twisted around Eve's leg, and she had really kind of tripped her up. And then Mary is, with great confidence, she crushes any sins, and she's in full control of the situation.
So a real simple question is, how large is the drawing or doodle?
I think it's just, it doesn't say, but they now sell it also as card, and I think it was probably more of a format like this.
Wow.
Is it displayed, or
Excuse
is
me?
it displayed somewhere at the Abbey?
You can. So I bought these are Christmas cards, so you can buy them at from the website of the Abbey, and they have smaller ones. But it never says what the original size of the painting was. But since she was saying she was doodling, it was probably kind of a paper size format. And there's also a beautiful, I'm not going to read it out, but there is a beautiful little poem on the back where that interplay really comes together between Eve and the Virgin Mary. And Virgin Mary calls her sister, and God has brought us a new day, so I'm with child, through whom all will be reconciled. So it's very nice.
I guess one thing that I like is that it's always seen as that the fallen woman and the Virgin Mary are sort of diametrically opposed, that they're two sides, but here they are together,
Yeah.
with each other. And I think it probably would take a sister who's part of a sisterhood to put those two people who history always makes as two very different souls together.
Yeah. Actually, if you do one more slide, I think we can come back to that. Yeah, and there's so many things they're constantly connected. So the one hand, Mary touches her face very tenderly, and then she holds Eve's hand right on her tummy, and that's a kind of a motherly, maternal bond almost. Only women can do that. I mean, not to be against men, but it is a special thing. I mean, it's just very special if you can put someone else's hand on your tummy and your womb and the baby's inside. And I think also just the colors to kind of broaden things a little. What do you think of this? What is she wearing? Her hair, isn't it? It's amazing. I think that's such a unusual way of dressing a person, because again, if you think about it, in paradise, Eve was naked, and the nun probably didn't want to draw a naked woman. So I think this is such a beautiful way of doing it, in fully dressing Eve with her hair, and also the colors. Sister Grace has spoken a little bit about her work, but hasn't kind of completely pulled it apart, because again, I think it was more a subconscious drawing and just pulling things out as she felt it. But commenting on the color that she chose for the hair, it's kind of a reddish tone, and Adam in Hebrew is translated into it's earthly, because he comes from earth, so it's that reddish tone. Again, to use that, so to connect Eve with Adam through the color of her hair, and just we need to. And also, I thought the hairdress of the Virgin is beautiful, kind of the blue, again the blue color, the heavenly Queen of Heaven, and then it almost looks a little bit like a cross. So again, maybe foreshadowing the death of her son on the cross.
When I first saw the picture, I saw Eve as the harlot. And I think this artist is undoing the myth about Eve being the bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And then saying it's full of compassion. The picture is just full of compassion.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Okay.
It's a beautiful image of reconciliation for all of us. I think it's just very powerful that the two sisters in their humanity can come together in that way. Much like you said, it's just so full of compassion in that way.
Yes. Yes. Yep. One more. John has.
I was looking at the hair, and I noticed the strong lines in Mary's dress.
Uh-huh.
And I just think it's really interesting that you have those kind of similarly strong lines dressing both of them. So while one is wearing a white dress and the other one's clothed in red hair or brown hair, it's there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really neat.
Yeah, I think there's connection constantly kind of going back, but the fruit and the fruit of in the womb, the arms, the hands, how they connect. Yes. Yes, wonderful. I think we could go on for a long time. This is a wonderful image, and while I was reflecting on it, it's kind of reconciliation and reconcile with things, and so again, I like to put the questions on it, and again, it's just my question, and it's, am I ready to approach a challenging situation or a person in need? I mean, so am I willing to take that step forward? Next slide. So now let's turn over to our second painting of the evening. It's a presentation of the Virgin at the temple. It was created in 1534 to 1538 by Titian. Titian's exact birth date is unknown, but was probably born between 1488 and 1490. He was one of the greatest Italian Renaissance painters of the Venetian school of the 16th century. Titian was recognized early in life as a supreme talented artist. He was later commissioned to produce works of art for many European courts and was one of the first painters to develop an international reputation. Titian is known above all for his remarkable use of color. Through Venice's preeminence in oriental trade of spices and luxury goods, Venetian artists such as Titian had always enjoyed access to the finest and most costly pigments. Greater trade connections with Northern Europe during the 15th century also introduced them to the new technology of oil painting, which had been perfected in the Low Countries. Titian contributed to all major areas of Renaissance art, painting altarpieces, portraits, mythologies, and pastoral landscapes with figures. Titian's only visit to Rome was in 1545 to 46, lodging at the Belvedere Palace at the Vatican. For the first time, Titian was able to see the archaeological remains of ancient Rome. Titian was a contemporary of Michelangelo and Raphael, both of whom were mainly based in Rome. It has been documented that Titian and Michelangelo met in person at that time. Titian died of a fever on the 27th of August in 1576 as the plague raged in Venice. Titian had a brilliant career, spanning more than 66 years, producing over 150 paintings, many of which are masterpieces. These works inspired countless generations of artists, such as Rembrandt, Diego Velázquez, Peter Paul Rubens, and many others. So as we consider our second work of art of this evening, I will quote from Proverbs chapter 8, verses 22 and 23. I quote, "The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth." This is a quote of one reading we hear for the memorial of the presentation of the Virgin Mary. The memorial commemorates the purity of Mary and the faith of her parents, Joachim and Anne. And as I mentioned, it is celebrated today. This event is not mentioned in the Bible. However, it is told in the book of James, an early gospel that was ultimately not included in the Bible. And it was later expanded upon in the influential medieval book with the lives of saints known as the Golden Legend by Jacobus de Vaugirard. And so now again, we can have a look at this painting. And so just to keep in mind, I just wanted to point this out. So this was painted for confraternity in Venice, within their building. They like to decorate their buildings. And just to point this out, so this painting is more than 25 feet long and over 10 feet tall. So it covers an entire wall. And then just kind of this, so there was an actual wall and there was an actual door in the wall. So just that's one other, just a feature already to point out. So when Titian painted the painting, he kind of worked that in. He put masonry work around the frame so to kind of make it work. So underneath the steps of the temple, it looked like there's an entrance to a cellar or something. This one, unfortunately, I 150 years later, the fraternity decided we need a second door in the wall. so, so they literally opened the frame, cut out the canvas, and made another door there. So that's just a couple of things. And today, this room is part of the Galleria dell'Accademia in Venice, and maybe some of you have had the chance to actually go and see it. It's just, I wanted to put this in our minds. I mean, this is a really large work of art. So, yeah, any reflections, thoughts, questions?
So, focusing on the doors, because I was curious about the black boxes. So, it's almost touching on trompe-l'oeil, would you say?
Yes, a little bit, yeah. It's just, in this case, there is a real door. In trompe-l'oeil, it just makes you believe there would be a door. But in this case, there is an actual door. He just kind of framed it with the masonry.
I really think that the Virgin is just beautiful. You can tell that there's a little halo, so she's special. And she's also dressed in blue, so maybe that's a symbolism associated with Our Lady.
Yes, yeah. And we can maybe focus on this. So if we jump a couple of, maybe just even if you go back. If I may just kind of also help us with the structure, again, because it's such a large painting. Titian almost divided it into 3 areas, and we're gonna focus into each of them. So it's kind of this part, which we will come to. Yes, we see Mary kind of walking up the steps of the temple, and then is a group of people down here, and we're going to talk about this, and it's her parents. So this is Saint Anne, her mother, and this is her dad, Joachim. And then these are people from the fraternity. They kind of like, if they paid for it, they like to be included in the painting. And then this was because it's a charitable confraternity, so they included a woman begging for money. So again, that kind of connect everything back to the fraternity. If we go one, and again, I like my lines, right? So it's beautiful if you really look at it. So the Virgin, or Mary, she looks straight into the eye of the priest. And then if you follow the eyes of her mother, she kind of looks at the second priest, and so behind. So thinking. And then if we go one more, there you go. Yes. So yes, it's a little beautiful halo, not just around her head, it's her entire body. She's the light of the world. She really illuminates the entire space. And then the blue, yes, it's kind of the Queen of Heaven, connects her to the sky. Yes, any other thoughts?
I think it's pretty cool that you're looking up at her, and being that this is a depiction of a child, that's something that you probably wouldn't think of, or I wouldn't think of as an artist, is, we're looking up to Mary, even as a child. So.
Mm-hmm. So she already had that elevated status right as a child, yes.
Two questions. I don't know if you know or not. Was it common for people to present their daughters as well as their sons?
Okay, so now I have to be careful. I think some parents would do that. In the Golden Legend, it is described, so Mary's parents, Anne and Joachim, Joachim was a priest, and they were getting up in their ages, and they didn't have children. So they prayed for having children. And then in an advanced age, Anne was visited by an angel. And she was announced to bury a child, to carry a child. And as a thank you, she said, "I will give my child back to you as a thank you." And so that's why. And it's supposedly, even in the Golden Legend, it says when Mary was 3 years old. She's probably, I mean, she's older than that. But again, it's kind of, it says her parents kind of put her on the bottom of the steps of the altar of the temple, and Mary walked up all kind of by herself and kind of almost never looked back. So kind of a beautiful, she knew where she needed to go.
Second question is probably a couple back, but on the far edge, there's some of the kind of dark-looking people. I don't know if there's any symbolism to that, or it's just they're on the edge of the
Right,
painting.
and if we go one slide, or two probably. Oh, yeah.
There they are.
Yeah, I know, and that might be a little bit the way it's, the photograph is taken to be able to do it, because if you look at different ones in the internet, then it doesn't come out quite that dark. Okay. So I don't think there is some underlying notion of the darkness
Not nearly
coming
as
in or something.
mysterious as
Yes,
I might
yeah.
have made it out.
Who is the person sitting below the steps with the basket?
Yes, so if we go one more. Yes, so so Mary's walking up, her parents, and so everyone is pretty much more or less looking this way, except actually her father, which I think in my mind is a very pivotal person in the painting. It kind of pulls everything together. I mean, for me, it's kind of Mary and then Saint Joachim, the way he's positioned. But yes, so this person obviously is very, and I think if we go one more slide, I zoomed into this. Yes. So she's an egg seller. She is selling eggs, and the belief is that Titian put her in, and also, sorry, if you go one more. We see a Roman.
Whoa. There we go.
Yeah, that's good. A Roman torso, and it's showing the Old Testament, so and the old way of being, and the Greco-Roman times, but they are now overcome with what's coming through Mary and then giving birth to Jesus Christ. So it's kind of a referring back to the olden times. And also the way she looks, so if you go one back, because she also is pretty much the only one who looks backwards. Everyone else is looking forward, and she's kind of looking backwards. Oh, yeah, Mary. Excuse me?
I thought you were going to say it was Titian.
Oh, it was Titian himself. No.
There is a rather dark figure up in the upper right corner that I'm curious about, behind the priests.
If you go
it's
just one
almost
forward, do another one there. I know, and I have to say, I looked at that, and I really think it depends on which images I look at. And there's also, if you're interested in it, this painting was just completely, they did a restoration on it. So there's a lot of detailed images and a lot of information on it. And this is an image after when it was restored. And it does, and these figures on the very edges come out very dark. But similarly with the people on the far left-hand side, no, it didn't seem that they said something, because on the other versions they are lighter. I know it is a bit odd. I went kind of back and forth between the images, and in other images it wasn't coming out so dark. So. Yeah, I don't, yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah, and then maybe, so I think what struck me personally with this painting and also with the feast that's being celebrated, God had a plan. I mean, sometimes, of course, but I don't even think about it all the time, but there is a plan. I mean, he created the perfect vessel with Mary. She was born through grace. She was sinless. So she was that person, a perfect vessel, I think is a really beautiful way of describing it. And she was ready, and she was taught right from the beginning of her life that she could say yes when Angel Gabriel came to her and asked her to play this important role. So I thought that was, and I think it comes across in the painting. So, Amelia, over here.
I just noticed as you were panning the picture back and forth that on the far right, behind what I would assume would be the person of the temple, there is a person in black who looks like he's deceased. And I'm not quite sure what to make of that.
Yes, we spoke about that. I believe it has something to do, because this was restored and the way it was photographed, that the edges come out very dark. Maybe someone knows something about it. Unfortunately, I think it's more a trick of the eye or a trick of the camera than...
Contemplating the person being a representative of what Mary was going to have to endure in her life.
Mm-hmm. And it might be that it kind of like a foreshadowing. Unfortunately, I can't answer the question for sure, because it does come out lighter in some other images, so not 100% sure on that one. Okay, so we need to move on.
So I guess just the mountain is pretty captivating in the background.
Uh-huh.
And just how, you're looking up again, and there's a temple on the right side, and then you have this cloud, this mountain. Is there symbolism with that, or why do you think that was included?
Mm-hmm. I think it was also trying to balance the image, the painting a little bit, because again, it's a large canvas. He also had to kind of fill it with something, but you have a very dominant structure over here, and I think Titian was trying to balance the painting. I mean, he brought in a bit of a structure here to balance the painting a little bit.
So it's very odd that he would be turned away. I guess it gives motion, and the scene is not completely static with the father turned away, but it's still an odd choice.
For Joachim to turn around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It might be a visual element also to bring in the people from the back, kind of just like more kind of a visual. And I think it does create that it is more connected, the painting. It actually brings in the other people. Just so to give also our last work of art an equal opportunity to be discussed, I would like to move on. And so we leave this painting with my question: do I fully embrace God's plan for my life? If we next slide. So now it is time to explore our third and last painting of the evening, the Virgin and Child with St. Anne and St. John the Baptist. It is also known as the Burlington House cartoon. It was created by Leonardo da Vinci, as we said, either around 1500 or 1506 to 1508. Leonardo da Vinci is considered a genius who was a painter, mathematician, engineer, architect, botanist, sculptor, and anatomist. His detailed knowledge of anatomy, light, botany, and geology allowed him to create some of the most renowned masterpieces in art history, including The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. Leonardo was born near the town of Vinci in Tuscany in 1452. He trained in Florence as a painter and sculptor in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio. He was principally active in Florence during 2 periods, and then also in Milan. He kind of went back and forth. Later in his life, he lived in Rome, and he spent his last years in France in the service of the French king. Leonardo died of a stroke and was buried in St. Hubert Chapel on the grounds of Ambrose Chateau, France in 1519. There are fabulous documentaries about the life and work of Leonardo da Vinci, and the most recent one was created by the American filmmaker Ken Burns, and it was just actually released, I think, maybe even just last week on PBS. There's also a fantastic documentary. It's called Decoding Da Vinci, and it was released in 2019 to mark the 500th anniversary of Leonardo's death. So as you consider the cartoon of Leonardo da Vinci, either here on the screen or in your handout, I will quote from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12, verses 49 and 50. I quote, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my heavenly Father is my brother and sister and mother." And with this, for the last time of this evening, see if, and we can go one more, then we can get rid of this. There we go. What do you see? What are your eyes drawn to at first? Who are the figures? Emilia?
Well, it took me a minute to pick it out, but you've got that upraised finger again,
Yep.
like John the Baptist in his other painting of John the Baptist, I believe it was.
It is.
And and that's Saint Anne doing it there, but it's that
And if
look above.
If you go one more. So yeah, so the finger, yeah. So it might, I don't know, does it come out right? Is that okay, or shall we go back to the other image? Can you see this?
Well, you can't see the finger pointing
or
up.
so
You
then
can
go
see
back.
just the clenched or the
Go
closed there.
back.
The finger is
One more back.
is
Sorry.
eluding us.
There you go.
There
Let's
we
take.
go.
Yes, here's the finger. Yeah. So this is Saint Anne, the mother, and that's the Virgin Mary, and then who else do we have?
Jesus sort of blessing John.
Yes, so exactly. So Jesus, and then he is actually holding St. John's chin up a little bit, and then with his right hand, he's blessing him. Yes, so beautiful. And just kind of, and I think we have looked at, or I've shown some cartoons before, and maybe in our world today, we think of cartoon as a comical drawing. But in art history, a cartoon refers to an Italian word, and it actually means a large sheet of paper. And although during the time of the Renaissance, they didn't have large sheets of paper, so it's actually 8 pieces of smaller paper glued together. And if you see it in the museum, you actually can see the seams. These drawings were often made for two reasons. One was to show a very detailed and the proper size work of art for a patron, so they could see it better, or it was used as to then be transferred onto a canvas. So then the artist or the technician would make little prick lines along the outline of the figures, and then they would use charcoal to push that through the prick lines, and then when you would remove it, you had a little outline, and then that would help the artist to paint the actual painting on canvas or on a piece of wood. However, this cartoon does not have prick lines, and we do not have a matching oil painting. So it might be for the first reason that Leonardo da Vinci made it potentially to show to a patron. But also we know that he just loved to draw and do things and try things out. And so he might just prepared it for the sake of it, just to produce a perfect drawing. And actually, so maybe okay, yes, please.
Well, I was just going to mention that you've got Mary and Jesus both kind of with their heads tilted in the same direction, and then Joseph and John with their heads in the opposite direction. And the way the light kind of is caught on Mary and Jesus, it's kind of remarkable, I guess. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're kind of echoing each other, isn't it? So we have the mother and the child, and the mother and the child, but then so the two children kind of looking at each other. And I think just what you think of the looks actually really much coming back to our first work of art. How do they look at each other? Right?
There's that connection. You definitely see that same kind of connection between two women.
Yes, I think there's love just jumping out of the painting, don't you think? It's so beautiful. I mean, the way the mother, Saint Anne, looks at her daughter, and then again the way the Virgin Mary looks at her son. I mean, there's love, there's tenderness in this, there's pride in it. It's so beautiful, and I think it. I was going to draw a circle because I like drawing things, but it didn't work out. But it is if you kind of it's the gaze from the mother onto her daughter, and the mother are looking at her child, and even the gaze between Jesus Christ and St. John, and then kind of through the finger, it kind of our gaze is brought back to St. Anne.
It almost looks like Mary is sitting on Anne's lap.
She is. Exactly, yeah. It is an unusual way of presenting it, but Leonardo liked to do that. So actually, if we go forward a little bit, one more. So yeah, so actually there again, it's hard to, when I zoom in, so yeah, you see kind of the knees as the Virgin Mary is sitting on her legs, so the knees kind of interlock, and then you have this up and down movement, which is very interesting. Sorry, and if we go one more. So it's not the exact painting based on the cartoon, but again, we can see Leonardo was playing with very similar ideas. And so, yes, the Virgin is kind of sitting on her mother's lap.
I just think that it's neat when you think that Saint Anne is Jesus' grandmother.
Yes.
And my mom's name was Joanne, so I've always kind of had a connection with Saint Anne. So.
Oh, nice.
Did anyone else see the Leonardo da Vinci series on PBS? Yeah.
Oh, you have seen it already? Yeah, I kind of saw a little bit.
He couldn't separate the microcosm with the macrocosm. Everything was sort of fluid, and the eye was really, really important. And they specifically covered this picture And the narrator said, Anne was looking with happiness, the grandmother. Mary was some trepidation. She's not as happy as her mother because she knows what's going to happen. And then the lamb is a sacrifice. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. And we have talked. Oh, sorry, I don't want to.
The Leonardo da Vinci 4-hour program was on Iowa Public Television Tuesday evening.
Okay.
And I was able to watch most of it. It's outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And the usual for Ken Burns, what you would expect.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, it comes out here a little bit more, but also here, he chose, as also Michelangelo chose, to show the Virgin Mary really young. I mean, at this point, yes, she was young because she just had given birth, or Jesus Christ was a toddler. But then also to choose to depict her mother at a very similar age. Which I kind of reflected on, and by the way, next week we will see a painting by Caravaggio, and he chose a very different path. And it's going to be interesting what you guys think about that one. But in this way, I personally thought it was beautiful because as we think as a mother, you never age, right? I mean, we are always young at heart, isn't it? So no matter how old you are, and no matter how old your children will be or are, you always see them as little children. I mean, and I obviously only can talk about Emilia, who's just about 13, but still, she's still tiny. So I think that might have played into it a little bit, that he chose to keep her young. Yes, Emilia?
I
Yeah.
Saint Anne's face reminds me of the Mona Lisa, just the proportions and the colors.
Mm-hmm. It is, yes. Can you lead?
If, because my knowledge of Christian knowledge is very basic, so my question is, if John the Baptist was the cousin of Jesus, is Anne the grandmother of both, or was it on the other side of the family?
It was on the other side of the family.
Mm.
So the connection came through St. Joseph.
Okay.
Because, in most other paintings, everyone is looking at Jesus, if Jesus is in the painting. But Anne is looking at Mary.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think it is the, and I don't know if Leonardo was thinking that, but it is also the family. He really puts the family and the family bond very much into the foreground of the painting. And it's there's a couple of beautiful paintings and works of art where Saint Anne is teaching Mary, they're reading the scripts together. And it's this bond and also our responsibility, or her responsibility, to teach her daughter. So to going through the generations of faith, and that's what our responsibility is. And since it's 7:00, and that's what triggered my question here, do I recognize my important role in transmitting faith through generations? And I think, yes, thank you very much.